It is late at night, and you hear the phone ringing. You are all alone in your house, therefore you are the only one who could pick it up and put a stop to it as the ringing gets louder and louder. You expect the worst as you listen to your phone, but there is nothing on the other side. There should be someone there, but no one is answering. You ask them to speak, but there is still silence, and then it hits you. You are all alone, and you don't have the slightest idea who is calling you. But they know your number, they must know your address, and they know exactly what they are doing to you by calling you like this. This truly sounds like a horrible night, but what makes it worse is the fact that this was the least of what a young woman had to endure for a considerable period of her life. This is the mysterious story of Cindy James. On June 12, 1944, in Richmond, British Columbia, Cynthia Elizabeth James was born to a family of 6 children. She was the daughter of Otto Hack and Matilda Tilley. Her father was a former Royal Canadian Air Force pilot. She had 3 older brothers and 2 younger sisters. Cindy described her childhood in her diaries as tough and difficult due to her father's strictness. Later in life, Cindy pursued a nursing career in Vancouver in 1962. During this period of time she was alone since her father had relocated the whole family in France, due to his re-enlistment with the Air Force. Meanwhile, Cindy would write letters to her family where she explained she met a man in her college, during her studies. She claimed they even got engaged at one point, but once her fiancé discovered that he was suffering with terminal cancer, he ended his life during the time the couple were together. However, none of her parents or siblings ever met this person, whereas Cindy never provided his name. Nevertheless, her life changed a few years later, when in 1965 Cindy met Roy Makepeace. Roy Makepeace was a South African psychiatrist who was 18 years older than her. Besides getting married 1 year later on December 9, 1966, she also finished nursing school in the same year. Even though Cindy's parents found her marriage strange due to the age difference, they eventually agreed with it, even though they would later testify claiming the marriage was troubled and the couple was emotionally distant. Cindy herself would later make accusations of spousal abuse. On the other hand, Roy Makepeace denied these accusations. Cindy started working as a pediatric nurse at Vancouver General Hospitals from 1966 to 1975. Although Roy Makepeace was a psychiatrist in South Africa, he failed his medical license test twice in Canada. Therefore, he simply accepted a job as an assistant professor in the Faculty of Medicine. In 1973, Roy Makepeace started working as a director of health services at BC Hydro. In 1975, Cindy moved to work for Blenheim House, which was a facility caring for children having behavior disorders. She worked there for roughly 12 years and her colleagues noted her competence and professionalism. But what is important to know is that most of this period of time was clouded by a myriad of threats and attacks from unknown people. Thus begins the other chapter of her life. Up until this point, things would seem normal to Cindy, until suddenly she felt like she was being stalked and threatened with life. Cindy reported multiple cases of threats, which lasted for about 7 years, between 1982 and 1989. During that period, Cindy reported roughly 90 incidents of criminal activity to the police. In her claims, she stated she was the victim of stalking, vandalism, arson, harassment, intimidation, home invasion, and physical assaults, perpetrated by one or a few unknown persons. The incidents began in September 1982, only 4 months after Cindy separated from Roy Makepeace. She initially told her friends and family members that she suspected a stalker was lurking around her house. Then a series of obscene phone calls soon followed. She received the first phone call on October 7, 1982. According to Cindy's mother, she was reluctant to discuss the content of the phone calls, where she had indicated that the calls consisted of an individual speaking in different voices, or sometimes there was total silence. Some of the calls were described as violent or sexual. A few days passed, and on October 11, Cindy received a phone call consisting of loud breathing noises. The following day, on October 12, she received another call in a menacing whisper, which said, "I'll get you one night, Cindy." That's where she decided to report the calls to the police, who came to her place and suggested she keep a list of every call she would get and their content. They also suggested her to get an unlisted number. Shortly after the officer left, Cindy received a call in which an apparent male voice said, "You bitch. I'll get you." On October 13th afternoon, the caller threatened her. "So you think calling the police will keep you safe? You wait. I've got my zipper open, I'm talking to my throbbing." Before she abruptly ended the call. On October 15th, she reported to the police that someone had thrown a rock through one of her windows and entered her house, though nothing else had been disturbed. 4 days later, on October 19th, she reported that someone had entered her house and slashed a pillow on her bed. Following Cindy's numerous reports, a Vancouver police officer named Patrick McBride began to suspect that the culprit was her estranged husband. Nevertheless, Roy Makepeace denied the accusations. Cindy herself made conflicting statements regarding Makepeace, by stating to the authorities she did not think he was capable of tormenting her, yet she also divulged to her friends and co-workers that he was violently abusive during their marriage. On October 20th, 2 tenants who rented the basement of Cindy's home reported to police that they heard strange noises upstairs on the main floor after she had left for work. Upon investigating the area, Patrick McBride was informed by Cindy's next-door neighbor that she had witnessed a man standing outside the house on at least 3 different occasions. Moreover, she had also seen him one time entering the gate of the front yard. The neighbor insisted the man did not resemble Roy Makepeace. During the investigation, Cindy started a relationship with Officer Patrick McBride that lasted 1 year. The latter had recently divorced his wife and moved into Cindy's house on October 31st. Several days after McBride moved in, he found Cindy's ex-husband Roy Makepeace sitting in his parked car in an alley behind the house. When questioned, Roy Makepeace claimed he was trying to catch Cindy's alleged intruder in the act. He left once Patrick McBride informed him that there was no need for protection since he had moved in. In mid-November, Patrick McBride stated that he himself received a mysterious phone call at home in Cindy's presence, where the caller did not utter any words. This call was traced back to an exchange in the Vancouver suburb. Later in November, Cindy found a note pinned to her car windshield which featured a picture of a corpse lying under a medical sheet. Things only got even worse when on November 28, Patrick McBride observed that the phone lines outside the house had been cut in 5 different places. The Christmas week in December 1982, Cindy found a note outside her house reading "Merry Christmas," where there was attached a photo of a woman with her throat slashed, stained in red ink. Things would continue to escalate for Cindy James when on the night of January 27, 1983, Agnes Woodcock, a friend and co-worker of Cindy from Blenheim House, visited Cindy's house and found her lying unconsciously in her backyard with a nylon stocking wrapped around her neck. Once Cindy became conscious, she told Agnes Woodcock that she had been attacked from behind while walking outside her garage and that it was the assailant who brought her into the garage where another male was waiting to help him to strangle her. Moreover, she alleged that the man inserted a knife into her vagina while threatening to kill her younger sister Melanie if she confessed to the authorities about the attack. The doctors examined Cindy, but found no concrete evidence of a sexual assault, though they didn't completely dismiss the possibility. The police requested Cindy to see a psychiatrist, but she declined, fearing it would stigmatize her. 1 month from the attack on February 1, 1983, Cindy relocated her residence to a house in West Vancouver. Less than a week from the relocation, she received a threatening letter reading, "Run rabbit run, I'll show you how good I am. Soon, bang, bang, you're dead." Due to the numerous calls, Cindy moved to another house in April 1983. During this period her life wasn't that bad since her ex-husband Roy Makepeace was trying to reconcile with Cindy. Along with showering her with plenty of gifts, he even paid for her airline tickets to Indonesia so she could visit her brother Roger, who was stationed there. Over the above, several weeks after this trip, Cindy found another note on August 22, which read, "Welcome back, death, blood, hate." She kept trying to conceal her identity since she was back at square one. She painted her car a different color and hired a private investigator named Ozzy Cabin to help him look into her alleged stalker. She paid Aussie Cabin over the following 6 years. Aussie Cabin noted that Cindy went to extensive lengths to protect herself. She used to wear a portable panic button and kept pepper spray with her at all times. Things did escalate further as Cindy discovered some horrific scenes between October and November 1983. She found the remains of 3 strangled cats in her garden, each tied with rope. In her diary, she accused Roy Makepeace of destroying the garden. She kept receiving numerous phone calls at home, as well at work, where some of her co-workers at Blenheim House responded, who later told the authorities the caller did not speak. On January 30, 1984, the private investigator Aussie Cabin overheard strange noises on a two-way radio he had given Cindy, prompting him to visit her home. Upon arrival, he found her lying unconscious on her living room floor with a paring knife stabbed through her hand, and a note pinned through with a knife. The note, which was crafted with letters cut and pasted from a magazine, read, "Now you must die." Cindy was taken to a local hospital. In her interview with Aussie Cabin, she stated the last thing she remembered before being found was witnessing a man coming through the gate to her property who later on assaulted her and hit her over the head with a blunt object. She stated that, once incapacitated, she recalled her attacker inserting a needle into her arm. Doctors located a needle mark in her right arm, but found no traces of any drugs in her system. Cindy took a polygraph test after the incident, which purportedly showed no deception. However, the officer who conducted the test later stated that the results, by his estimation, proved inconclusive. Officer Kyo Ikoma, who reported to Cindy's residence the night of the alleged attack, stated that he observed blood smeared in circular patterns on the kitchen floor, as if someone had attempted to clean evidence. In February 1984, detectives began increasingly questioning Roy Makepeace, as Cindy had confided that she felt he was the one tormenting her. In his interviews, Roy Makepeace theorized that Cindy's attackers were part of the mafia and related to her employment at Blenheim House, since the latter often cared for children who were wards of the court. In March 1984, Cindy's father Otto met with Roy Makepeace at a donut shop in Vancouver wearing a police wiretap, where he told Roy Makepeace to cease contact with his daughter. After the meeting, Roy Makepeace wrote and sent a 6-page letter to Otto outlining his theory that he believed the mafia was after Cindy, and urged Otto to pressure police to investigate this angle. Over the summer of 1984, Cindy reported that the harassment incidents and their intensity was getting out of hand. On June 18, she phoned Aussie Cabin in panic, and he rushed to her home to find her cowering in the garden, claiming someone had infiltrated the house. Upon entering the house, Aussie Cabin discovered her dog, Heidi, cowering in the basement, alongside with a note reading, "Happy Birthday," next to which were some sexually explicit photographs. Cindy's dog Heidi had been physically abused, and Aussie Cabin noted that the rope bound around her appeared to be the same discovered on the dead cat Cindy had found the previous autumn. A cigarette was discovered on a windowsill in the basement, which did not match the brand Cindy used to smoke. Based on the physical abuse Heidi had endured, Aussie Cabin concluded that Cindy could not have been the perpetrator, stating, "She'd never have done that if she was the Cindy I knew." Over the following weeks, Cindy received other calls, one of which Aussie Cabin answered himself at Cindy's home while she was at work. Meanwhile, another dead cat was found lying in the stairwell of her house. On July 1, Cindy told Aussie Cabin that 2 men arrived at her front door posing as police officers, but fled when she radioed him. Cindy subsequently reported a series of further obscene calls, one of which consisted of the caller saying, "You're dead, bitch. It's gonna feel good." A co-worker of Cindy at Blenheim House also received a call which said, "Get rid of the big pig." On July 9, 1984, Cindy's mother Tilly spent the night at her home. In the middle of the night, Tilly awoke to Heidi barking and found Cindy checking windows and doors on the main floor of the house. Moments later, they both heard the doorbell ring and discovered a window near the front porch cracked in several areas. 2 weeks later, on July 23, Cindy claimed she was attacked by an assailant in nearby Dunbar Park while walking her dog at approximately 8:30 p.m. As per her recollection, she was assailed by a bearded man driving a green van, with a female passenger. Several hours later, around midnight, she was found in a dazed state attempting to enter a neighbor's house, and had a dark gray nylon stocking around her neck. Her dog was found by Aussie Cabin wandering in the park area. Cindy was taken to the nearby University of British Columbia Health and Sciences Center, where doctors observed 2 puncture marks in her right arm. A hospital receptionist told authorities a man with an accent had called the front desk inquiring about the hospital's security policies during the time Cindy was being treated. When police played audio of Roy Makepeace's voice, the receptionist felt there was a strong possibility it was the same person. A strange discovery would be made in October 1984. While under the care of a hypnotherapist, Cindy recounted a repressed memory of witnessing a double murder in the past, but did not divulge further details. Ever since the attack in July 1984, Cindy kept receiving anonymous calls, but none were long enough to be traced by the police. Cindy was questioned once again following the discovery that she was the witness of a double murder while questioned by a hypnotherapist in October of the previous year. She confessed she had witnessed her ex-husband Roy Makepeace murder a man and woman while vacationing at a cabin on Thormanby Island, near Sechelt, in July 1981. On top of that, she added that Roy Makepeace dismembered their bodies with an axe and smeared blood from one of the victim's severed limbs across her face. But however gruesome this confession is, it proved to be unreliable since it was later discovered that Cindy's sister, Melanie, was with her on this vacation and had no recollection of anything sinister occurring. Due to these recent events, 1985 would be the year where Cindy's life would turn from bad to worse, since in June 1985, she was involuntarily committed to the psychiatric unit at Vancouver's Lionsgate Hospital after having attempted to overdose on prescription drugs, though she later said she had not intended to kill herself. The police tried to investigate this case right away by taking into consideration all the angles that had been presented to them lately. On July 2, Cindy agreed to allow police to wiretap a phone conversation with Roy Makepeace, during which she accused him of being the source of her problems, and confronted him about the memory she recounted it under hypnosis of him murdering 2 people. During the conversation, Roy Makepeace denied the incidents, deeming Cindy insane and involved in an enormous revenge fantasy. Following this recorded call, the police employed officers to maintain 24-hour surveillance of Cindy, Makepeace, and 2 other unnamed suspects over a week-long period. The surveillance was ultimately terminated after nothing unusual was observed. Authorities further investigated Cindy's claims regarding the alleged dismemberments committed by Makepeace and found no evidence of any murders or missing person cases at the time. They even searched for the cabin where the alleged murders had happened, but they were unable to find it, while the police was investigating these leads. In early July, Cindy received a package at her home containing a charcoal-colored nylon stocking, along with a note reading, "Blood flowing freely." Several weeks later, on July 27, she found a cosmetics box on her front porch containing putrefied raw meat from a small animal. On August 5, Cindy called into the police station reporting a fire in her home. Authorities found what appeared to be pieces of burnt newspaper scattered in the room. Another fire was reported by Cindy the following day. On August 21, a third fire broke out in the basement bathroom of Cindy's home at approximately 4:45 a.m. The moment the firefighters and police arrived at the residence, they observed Cindy in a heated discussion with the private investigator Cabin, explaining that she had taken her dog out for a walk at approximately 3:15 a.m. and returned home to discover the blaze. The bathroom window was found partly opened by authorities, but the soot and dust on the windowsill showed no markings that an intruder had entered or exited through it. Charred remnants of a newspaper were discovered in the bathroom. A detective who investigated the fire later testified he believed Cindy had started the blaze herself. A detective named Carol Halliday also got involved in Cindy's case after the fire attacks that occurred back in August. In the fall of 1985, Carol Halliday requested the help of a psychologist named Dr. Anthony Marcus to conduct interviews with Cindy and examine different case files. This request from the detective came due to the fact that she felt that Cindy was lying and orchestrating her attacks all along. She also assumed that the male officers who investigated Cindy's case had been conned by the pretty woman in need of rescue. Now these interviews somewhat proved Carol Halliday's theory true when Dr. Anthony Marcus offered his professional opinion that Cindy may have been suffering from dissociative identity disorder stemming from a traumatic childhood incident, though he did not question Cindy about her early life during their interviews. On December 1st, Cindy relocated to a new house in Richmond. Things seemed to have calmed down up until 10 days later. On December 11th, at approximately 6 p.m., she was found by motorists semi-conscious in a ditch approximately 6 kilometers from her home, near the University of British Columbia campus. She was wearing men's work boots and a single glove, and once more, a nylon stocking was tightly tied around her neck. Due to frigid temperatures, Cindy was suffering from hypothermia and was rushed to a local hospital, where it was suspected she had been injected with some sort of tranquilizer. She also exhibited bruising and various cuts on her body. When interviewed in the hospital, Cindy claimed to have no memory of what occurred, or how she had gotten to the location where she was found. The last thing she remembered was having lunch during her workday, after which she stopped at a local pharmacy. Upon getting the feeling that police did not believe her and wasn't going to take her report much seriously anymore, she flew to visit her brother Roger in West Germany for Christmas. In early 1986, Cindy formally changed her last name from Makepeace, the surname of her ex-husband, to James, hoping to further conceal her identity. To help overcome her fears, her friend Agnes Woodcock and her husband, Tom, sometimes spent nights at Cindy's home. On April 16, the couple were awoken by Cindy, stating she heard a commotion in the house. During their investigation, they found another fire had been started in the basement. When they attempted to call the fire department, they found the phone was dead. Tom fled across the street to a neighbor's residence to call police, and when exiting the house, claimed to have witnessed a man standing on the street outside the residence. When Tom approached him, the subject fled on foot. Cindy stayed with the Woodcocks for several days following the fire, where they noted that she refused to eat and made comments that her life was no longer worth living. Alan Connolly, a psychiatrist who had been treating Cindy since January 1983, met with her and stated that, though he had long believed her allegations of harassment, he feared she was suicidal. Connolly had her committed to the psychiatric ward of St. Paul's Hospital for 2 weeks, where it was observed that she was suffering from anorexia and depression. She was subsequently transferred to Riverview Hospital, where a comprehensive psychological examination was conducted. The report noted, this 41-year-old woman on initial assessment was very resistant. She would only answer in one-word responses. She refused to discuss a number of topics and would give no eye contact. On the second date, her mood was considerably elevated. She had completed the other tests herself and was willing to talk. She seemed apprehensive as to how the tests could be used. She maintained good eye contact except when discussing the terrorizing incidents. She then would look down or cover her eyes and speak haltingly. She expressed upset and cried a great deal when relating these incidents. The patient kept asking if her responses to the items indicated she was crazy. Her IQ is well above average. This type of individual can be characterized as negativistic and conforming. They have unpredictable moods, pessimism, sullenness vacillating with social agreement and friendliness. They tend to anticipate and precipitate disappointments through their obstructive and negative behavior. This type of person tends to be vulnerable to fears. After a 10-week hospital stay, Cindy was discharged. According to her father, she told him she had been withholding information regarding her alleged attacks, stating that she knew the identity of the assailant but refused to name him. In August 1987, Cindy began working as a nurse at Richmond General Hospital. On August 28, her home alarm was triggered after a back window was broken, and 3 days later, on August 31, she reported to police that her front porch light bulbs had been loosened. The following week, she reported that someone had used a glass cutter to create a hole in the basement door window. In February 1988, Cindy indicated that someone had shattered a window to her home after securing it with electrical tape. On October 11, 1988, Makepeace received 2 strange voice messages on his home answering machine. One of the messages contained a hoarse voice speaking the phrase, "Cindy, dead meat soon," while the other stated, "More smack, more downers, another grand after we waste the c***. No more deal." He gave the answering machine tapes to his attorney, as he distrusted the Vancouver police, whom he felt might target him as a suspect. 15 days later, Cindy was found unconscious in her garage. She had been hogtied, was nude from the waist down, and again had a black nylon stocking tied around her neck. Around this time, the police hired mountain climber and knot expert Robert Chisnall to analyze the knots on the nylon stockings she had frequently been found bound with. At the time, Chisnall concluded that it was highly unlikely that Cindy would have been able to secure such knots herself. In January 1989, Richard Johnston, a life insurance salesman from whom Cindy had purchased a policy, moved into the basement unit of her residence. She offered him the rental on the basis that she would feel safer with someone else living with her. On April 8, a security guard at Richmond General Hospital, where Cindy was employed, discovered a note on the premises crafted with cut and pasted letters, which read, "Soon, Cindy." The phrase "sleep well" was also found written in the dew on her windshield. Following a reported attempted break-in at her home on April 29, the police used scent hounds in an attempt to track the alleged intruder, but the dogs found no trail. On May 10, 1989, scent hounds were utilized again following another alleged break-in, and were able to track the scent of an unknown individual that led over the backyard fence of Cindy's home. Over the course of the nearly 7 years that Cindy had reported the various incidents, the Canadian police spent an estimated 1.5 million Canadian dollars worth of resources investigating her claims, but no evidence could be located to corroborate them. Because of this, authorities suspected that Cindy was inventing the incidents herself and staging them to appear as though she were the victim of a violent stalker. Cindy expressed frustration with the police department, aside from one detective, Jerry Anderson. In a complaint she filed against the police department for her perceived dismissal by several officers, she positively singled out Jerry Anderson for his patience, unfailing professional conduct, and his exemplary investigation of this case. "He is the only member of the police I feel I can trust and be comfortable with," she said. At approximately 4 p.m. on May 25, 1989, Cindy picked up her paycheck from Richmond General Hospital. She spoke with a co-worker, who reported Cindy seemed to be in good spirits, and also informed her she hadn't experienced any suspicious activity at her home for at least 2 weeks. Cindy was last seen several hours later purchasing groceries at a Safeway supermarket and visiting a Bank of Montreal at the Blundell Shopping Centre. A bank patron told police they had stood in line behind Cindy at the bank's ATM, where she deposited her paycheck at approximately 7:59 p.m. That same day, Cindy had scheduled to have an infrared detection system installed in her home for security purposes, and had planned for her friends Agnes and Tom Woodcock to play bridge and spend the night. After not hearing from Cindy, the Woodcocks visited her home at approximately 10 p.m. and found the house locked and Cindy's Chevrolet Citation absent. They briefly spoke with Johnston, who informed them she had mentioned earlier that she was going to do some shopping. The Woodcocks drove past the Blundell Shopping Centre, which they knew Cindy to frequent, and found her car abandoned in the lot. They proceeded to drive to the Richmond police station to report Cindy as a missing person. Though she had only been missing for several hours, a patrol car was sent to investigate based on her extensive history with the police department. Upon examination of the vehicle, blood was located inside the car on the driver's side door, as well as groceries and a wrapped birthday gift for her friend's young son. Contents from Cindy's wallet were found lying underneath the car. A subsequent inspection of her home that night showed nothing had been disturbed. Police observed that the house was orderly and clean, and filled with numerous well-tended houseplants. The Canadian Coast Guard deployed searches of rivers in the area, as well as the Gulf of Georgia, in an attempt to locate the missing woman. Several days after Cindy was reported missing, her tenant, Johnston, informed police he had received a call at his office from a man claiming to be her father, inquiring about her life insurance policy. Johnston's secretary informed the caller that he would need to visit the office, as private insurance matters could not be relayed over the phone. When authorities questioned Cindy's father, he denied ever making the phone call. On June 8, 1989, Gordon Starchuk, a municipal paving worker, discovered Cindy's body in the backyard of an abandoned house at 8111 Blundell Road. Her body was hogtied with rope in a fetal position, and a black nylon stocking was bound tightly around her neck. Cindy's right leg lay beneath a bramble of blackberry bushes, and her coat was found lying near her body. The property where her remains were found was situated along a busy street near an intersection, which had frequent foot traffic from pedestrians. On the residence's exterior fuel tank, police found graffiti in orange spray paint reading, "Some died here." A line, spray-painted along the ground with the same orange paint, ran from the fuel tank to the spot where her body lay, encircling it. Inside the abandoned home, another spray-painted graffiti reading "Devil" was found. Sheila Carlisle, a pathologist who examined Cindy's body at the scene, noted that her hands had been bound so tightly that one finger had scratched another down to the bone. A pinprick consistent with a hypodermic needle was located on the inner right elbow of the body. Based on insect and larvae activity on the remains, forensic entomologist Gail Anderson concluded that the body had begun the decomposition process at the site where it was found as early as June 2, 1989. An autopsy determined that Cindy had died of multiple drug intoxication from substantial amounts of morphine, diazepam, and flurazepam. Her blood toxicology report showed that she had 10 times the lethal dose of morphine in her bloodstream. Based on an examination of her stomach contents, toxicologist Heather Dinn reported that Cindy had orally ingested approximately 20-30 mg tablets of flurazepam, in addition to numerous tablets of diazepam, a combination that itself was lethal. The method by which the morphine had been administered could not be determined, baffling the pharmacologist who analyzed the toxicology report. Traces of morphine were found in Cindy's stomach, though Dr. John McNeil stated that the amount could have resulted from intravenous injection of the drug. By McNeil's analysis, if Cindy had received the morphine via intravenous injection, she would have been rendered unconscious within mere minutes, and would have died within several hours. It was ultimately concluded by authorities that the overdose had been so large that there was no reliable estimate of how long Cindy could have remained functional. The police suspected Cindy's cause of death was likely a suicide or accident, based on the assumption that she had fabricated her numerous prior claims of assaults and stalking, and this was quickly reported by several local tabloid news outlets. Her personal private investigator, Ozzie Cabin, visited the morgue to examine her body on June 10 and observed that her remains exhibited lividity, the settling of blood post-mortem, visible on the skin, on the left side of her body. Because her body had been found lying on its right side, Ozzie Cabin felt that she may have died elsewhere, and that her body was relocated to the site where it was ultimately discovered. A memorial service was held for Cindy on June 14, 1989, 2 days after what would have been her 45th birthday. Police surveyed the memorial service using hidden cameras, capturing the faces and license plates of all who attended. Her ex-husband, Roy Makepeace, was not in attendance. In the summer of 1989, the abandoned house where Cindy's body was discovered was approved to be demolished. An extensive inquest into Cindy's death was undertaken in the spring of 1990 in Burnaby, which consisted of 5 jurors and featured testimony from over 80 witnesses. The inquest was originally scheduled to run 3 weeks, but upon it progressing much slower than expected, an additional 21 days were added. The inquest, which totaled 40 days, was the longest and most expensive in British Columbia at that time. The 2 recorded phone messages Roy Makepeace had received on his answering machine were included among the evidence presented. During his testimony on the stand, Roy Makepeace made various accusations against Cindy's family, alleging that her father had physically abused her throughout her childhood and that one of her brothers had molested her. He also accused the police of attempting to frame him. It was also revealed that, shortly after her death, Cindy's parents uncovered a hoard of various medications in her home, including sedatives and antipsychotic drugs, prescribed by her psychiatrists, which they disposed of by flushing down the toilet. Her younger sister, Melanie, also found a glass cutter in Cindy's purse along with a medical syringe kit, a urinary catheter, and saline solution in her bedroom. Jurors were presented with graphic footage of Cindy's decomposing corpse as it was discovered at the scene, as well as numerous accounts detailing her mental state leading up to her death. Testimony was provided from several psychiatrists and psychologists, including those who had personally treated Cindy over the years. Dr. Paul Termanson testified that he believed she suffered from hysterical personality disorder, whereas Dr. Wesley Friesen, a longtime psychiatrist of Cindy's, stated he suspected she had borderline personality disorder with elements of post-traumatic stress disorder. By Friesen's account, Cindy possessed a tremendous amount of rage toward her father and, based on their numerous sessions, Friesen believed there was a strong likelihood that her father sexually abused her when she was a child, though she never indicated this to be the case. The inquest focused as well on the attempts to discern whether or not Cindy could have tied herself in the state she was discovered in, using the same length of nylon found tying her body. Not expert Robert Chisnall demonstrated in court how she could have tied herself within a 3-minute timeframe, before the effects of the narcotics in her system would have taken effect. The inquest concluded on May 25, 1990, exactly 1 year after Cindy had disappeared. After deliberations, the jury was unable to determine whether her cause of death was suicide, homicide, or accidental. It was ultimately ruled that Cindy had died of an unknown event, and the case was formally closed.